Welcome to Rhyme and Reason, hosted by Dr. Barry. Today, Barry welcomes founder of Same Here Global, Eric Kussin. And now, here's Dr. Barry Reiman.
Hey guys, Dr. Barry here with my co-host, the one and only Mr. Zachary Elliott. Zach, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself, Dr. Barry?
You know, I can't complain, but let's really get honest. You know, you're not feeling good today. And
I'm hoping people can just draw that conclusion by my Elmer Fudd voice.
It is becoming. So,
well, thank you. Thank you.
I am Dr. Barry. I have been in this field for a long, long time. Welcome to all the listeners. So grateful to be here, to be able to put on a podcast with Zach. We have a really awesome guest today. Zach, can you just tell us, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you landed on this gig?
Well, let's see. You've been in the industry for a long time. I have been around the industry for a long time until I got into recovery myself a little over 5 years ago. And now I am also someone who has struggled with mental health issues, and the combination of treating that and my recovery, I've learned gone hand in hand. So, I work at Recovery Unplugged with 3 other people down here in Florida as an alumni coordinator. That's me in a nutshell right now. Hopefully I can, divulge more information in the next hour.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And you're being modest. The way I see you, you are one of the most caring and energetic individuals that I've ever encountered. So kudos to you. Today we have an amazing guest coming on. His name is Eric Kussin. He started off his career at the NBA league office, then went to the Sky, then was in the front office with the Phoenix Suns, then took a round trip and wound up with the New Jersey Devils, and eventually rounded out his sports career with the Florida Panthers, where, in my opinion, and I can't wait to hear from him, his life took what I would call just a divine turn through heartache, through struggles of his own that has led him on a path to where he is today. And if we could bring Eric on, I know, and I'm just going to preface this by saying he is one dedicated individual. He's currently traveling on a train to Connecticut. And so, we might hear a little background noise. He might go in and out a little bit, but we're really going to try to do our best to have a really awe-inspiring conversation with Eric.
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Hey.
Good afternoon.
So you need to share with us. Are you in your own little car right now? Do you have one of those, laid-back seats, your own little bedroom? Is this like a Amtrak? What kind of train are you on, Eric?
So I was listening to the intro, and I know you were giving background on sports. So I'm actually, instead of heading north from New York, I'm heading south to DC to do an event with the Washington Wizards. So they're doing a mental health awareness night. I'm moderating that panel that we're having pregame. It's about an hour-long panel. We had one of their players, Daniel Gafford, who I interviewed prior to, and really cool how much he's opened up and been willing to share, given that he's a public figure. But to answer directly your question, I'm on that Amtrak train that's going from New York down to DC right now, and I found this tiny little cubby hole where I'm holding my mask because it's required on a train, but I'm hoping in the spirit of true connection and being able to talk to you all, I don't get policed too much here and asked to put it back on.
Well, we're still, and just my opinion, finally getting to the tail end of what has been deemed or has made us all a little crazy, and that's a little shameless plug for your nonprofit that you have. But hopefully the whole mask thing, they're gonna lighten the. I think things are done a little bit differently up north. We're in Florida where COVID doesn't exist. Or at least that's how it's perceived. So I don't even know what a mask is anymore.
It's a way to hide your expressions.
It is a way to hide your expressions.
The last few years, because we do events all over the country, and to see the difference, I don't want to make the talk about this, but to see the difference, because it affects mental health in terms of how each state handles what's going on, has been really interesting, right? So I'm in the Northeast right now. You go on a train, everyone's got them on. It's an expectation. There is no question about it whatsoever. Whereas you go other places, and to your point, they don't even know what a mask is anymore. So it's interesting, the difference from one state to the next, traveling around that much.
Love that. Can you just give us a little bit of your story? I didn't want to give it away to the viewers, but I've known you for a while now, and you have, what I consider to be one of the biggest turnarounds in someone's mental health that I've ever witnessed. And why don't you share a little bit about kind of what led you to where you're at and where you're at today?
For sure, and certainly, guys, stop me in the middle, because I can talk for a while about this stuff. It's what I'm passionate about, and I'll try to give the condensed 5 to 7 minute version instead of, Barry, what you've heard, the longer version. But like you said, I was down in Florida in my last position. I was chief revenue officer down there with the Panthers, and I was 6 months into my tenure. So this was really early on. And unfortunately, my brain and my body just started to shut down on me. What felt like out of nowhere. I was speaking with my owner at the time, the same gentleman who owns the team right now, Vinny Viola. Couldn't have been a nicer, more supportive system there in Florida. And so happy to see the success that they're having right now, because he's the reason I went down there. Is I saw his leadership as someone who could really turn things around. But 6 months in, I didn't know where it came from, and I couldn't put sentences together. I couldn't look at people in the eyes. I was having agoraphobia, couldn't leave the house. And it came what felt like out of nowhere, as I was sharing. I went back to New York, where supposedly the top doctors in this space are at. And I say that with air quotes. I think there are a lot of top doctors here. There are also a lot who, unfortunately, we are given that title because of what they've studied. But I essentially was given my first doctor's appointment that I went to. I was given 5 psychotropic drug combinations to try right off the bat, being told I have a shitload of depression on top of a shitload of anxiety, and I need heavy artillery for it to be knocked out of my system. And what followed from that was 2.5 years of hell, of laying in a bed, staring at the ceiling, not watching TV, not listening to the radio, dead to the world, as these doctors tried over 50 different psychotropic drugs on me. I was like basically a dartboard, and they were trying to hit the bullseye with the dart somehow. And so I tried every SSRI, SNRI, MAOI, tricyclic that's out there. And unfortunately, none of them worked. I was then told to do TMS therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation. I was 23 sessions in, 23 days in a row. The night of the 23rd into the morning of the 24th, I couldn't fall asleep. And the first ever experience of a suicidal ideation came over my mind, something I'd never felt before. I'd never thought about that topic before. There was nothing bad situationally that had gone on in my life. So it really felt like it jumped up out of nowhere. It was this thought of looking at this bottle of pills, and I was sitting on my hands, stopping myself from lunging at the bottle, because the thoughts that were going on repeat were swallow that bottle, swallow that bottle. And I kind of describe it as the 5% of my brain that was working, that was rational, was fighting with the 95% that was irrational, that was sending this error message over and over and over again about swallowing that bottle. The rational thinking part said, you don't want to do that. Why would that thought even jump into your mind? And be around family and ask to be hospital. I'll spare the public details of what hospital it is, because it's not the best outcome from the hospital experience. But I met with the attending psychiatrist the first day, and she looked at my chart, and I left at her top doctor plaques on the wall, and she said, Eric, you tried everything there is. Your last resort is to do shock therapy. And I want to hone in on that comment, because you all working at Recovery Unplugged and using music as a healing modality, this is a top doctor telling me, because I tried excuse me, gonna sneeze. Because I've tried every single drug that's out there, and I've tried the TMS therapy, there's nothing else for me to try. That was the only thing that was available to me, was to get my brain shocked with the seizure. But she called, in fairness, she didn't call shock therapy, she called Electroconvulsive Therapy, or ECT. And so for those who aren't familiar with that, they put electrodes on your brain. They pump you up with propofol, a general anesthesia. They put you to sleep, and they shock your brain, trying to wake it back up. And it's essentially a hard restart, hoping that by generating a seizure while you're under general anesthesia, it literally is going to restart the brain and get the synapses firing again. I mean, that's how out of it I was for that 2.5 years, that the brain wasn't working. And unfortunately, 12 sessions, 5 weeks inpatient, there was no, unfortunately, there was no positive results from it. And so I left the hospital after that 5 weeks, feeling no better than I had the 2.5 years prior, essentially thinking my life is over, because unless Merck or Pfizer invents some miracle pill that treats this thing called treatment-resistant, fill in the blank, whatever label I have, I'm never getting better. And where the story turns, again, this is the shorter version of the story, is I'm introduced to a woman who practices integrative psychology. I had no idea what the hell the term integrative meant. But, my parents were begging me to go because they met this woman, and she said she treats differently than all these other doctors that I'd been to. And I think for a lot of people listening, they can relate to this, is every appointment I had been to for the 2.5 years prior, there were always 3 portions of every visit. Didn't matter if it was a 30-minute visit, hour long, hour and a half. The first session was always, Eric, it's nice to meet you. What are your symptoms? And I had to list my symptoms off. Cognitive fog, malaise, fatigue, can't get out of bed, can't think straight. Okay, based on your symptoms, the next section was always, here's your diagnosis. And I was diagnosed with everything from melancholic depression to anhedonic depression to PTSD to OCD to ADD to ADHD. I mean, if there was a label for it, the alphabet soup in the DSM-5, I was given it. And then the third session, okay, based on diagnosis, here's the medication that's best for you to fix this. Hey, sorry about that. Can you guys still hear me even with the train?
Yeah.
Okay. So based on your symptoms, here's the diagnosis, right? And so this woman treated it very differently than all the other places I'd been. She sat me down on the couch and she said, Eric, I want to get to know you, the person. She didn't ask me what my symptoms were. She didn't dive into labels or diagnoses. And I want people to think about that when you're given a chance by a doctor or even a friend, and they say, let me know about Barry. Tell me who Barry is. Tell me who Zach is. How different of a conversation that is than what we normally have on a day-to-day basis, where it's, hey, Barry, what's going on with Recovery Unplugged? Hey, Zach, why aren't you feeling well today? What's going on with your voice, right? We ask each other very specific questions situationally about things that are going on in our life. This doctor, when she gave me the blank slate just to start sharing who I am, you're oftentimes not given that opportunity. And a doctor is able to hear that and say, okay, based on how this person is sharing their story and what is coming out of their story and the chronology with which they're sharing, what story are they telling themselves and what have they been through, right? So I just start sharing. I'm the middle of 3 boys, sports crazed family, start talking about my older brother, start talking about my younger brother. And so in talking about my older brother, I'm thinking to my earliest memories, like, oh, okay, well, we were 8 years old. I was 8 years old. He was 12. He gets into an accident and is put in a body cast because he breaks his femur bone. So he's in a body cast for a year. He's homeschooled from that. Heals from that, and a month later gets diagnosed with ALL, a children's form of leukemia. So late 80s, early 90s, unfortunately not the best prognosis, and 5 years of chemo and radiation, but miraculously he goes into remission after 5 years. Next event I can remember, he's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends, open top, no seatbelt in the back, he's in the back, car loses control, he flies out of the back, lands on his head, cracks his head open, loses partial vision in his eyes, in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college. Right after college, is feeling this pain in his knee. Do all the blood tests. Unfortunately, blood tests come back that the cancer from childhood has returned. So he's going to law school now while getting his chemo treatments. Second time around, they want to give him a much stronger chemo regimen to really knock it out of his body. But unfortunately, the chemo builds up so much, well, where it's doing a good number on the cancer cells, it's also unfortunately attacking the healthy cells, and his body's breaking down. I get a call from my parents to meet them at the hospital. It is he's got 105 fever. That leads into septic shock, where the organs start attacking themselves. Septic shock, he falls into a coma, and now being in a coma, they don't know if he's going to wake, or if he does wake, if he's going to have any brain activity. And so he's in a coma. That 1 month goes by. I'm driving back and forth between the hospital and school. My parents basically living at the hospital. 2 months, 3 months. Finally, at the end of the 3rd month, he wakes. Miracle, full cognitive faculties about him, but his kidneys fail from the rigor of the septic shock, and he needs to go on dialysis. And so we all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father is donating a kidney to him. That all is successful. So you figure, okay, things are going in the right direction. And I get that first job at the NBA league office right out of college. And right after that, 3 of my close friends passed away back to back of misdiagnosed or undiagnosed heart conditions. One guy running on a treadmill, one guy carrying boxes of the stairs in the apartment, just freak things. And so the one doctor that I talked to, what else happened to you as a child and as an adult that impacted your health I didn't know about? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been told, I'm 35 years old, I've been told for the last 2.5 years, I have a chemical imbalance, and here's my different labels. What does what happened to me between the ages of 8 and 22, by the way, I'm not even done telling the story of my life, have to do with how I'm feeling right now, 13 years later. I didn't understand because obviously there's so much more to share about the healing process and then what from the healing process. But that was what happened to me was this just onto a basketball team in college, and then being a sports executive, and everything is going in the quote right direction situationally in life. You're not focusing on what happened to you previously because you're getting the dopamine hit every single day from what you love and you enjoy doing. You don't focus on your mental health. You don't think it applies to you because you haven't been labeled with this thing called a mental illness before.
Wow. I mean, that is, and again, we caught, I would say 98% of what you said. You had about 15 seconds in a row where you sounded like a robot from outer space, right towards the end too. So we're all assuming that this integrative psychologist, or was she an integrative psychiatrist, did that is really the thing that impacted you the most and got you turned around?
Yeah, and I know I see low on my, but am I clear right now as I'm talking? If I am, I'll give the yeah. So she started saying to me, we're in Philadelphia if anyone wants to know.
Really?
So yeah, we're making our way down. So she was the first one who introduced the concept of brain-body connection and the idea of integrative medicine, and how do you read Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. And I know that's not new for a lot of people, but it was new for me at the time. And this is 2017 that this is happening. And so she sent me to a weekend breathing course, okay, if you can imagine. I joined this course, and I'm only man, only one under 40, only one in the country. Me and 8 Indian yoga mats. I fish out of water. I share that story very, in very great detail because one, these women became some of my best friends from that course, but two, I have a guy his name is Chucky Jacoby, and his saying, it's simple, but it's poignant. His saying, you don't know what you don't know. What I didn't know. Like, this is a practice and an exercise that is practiced all over the world. In fact, the gentleman who runs the nonprofit, his name is Sri Ravi Shankar. He's got 350 million followers on social media. Like, between the connection of all of them together, and people have come to his courses, the guy understands the brain-body connection. And as someone who is, extremely skeptical and as an athlete and likes to find the answers and the reasons why things work if I'm going to buy into them, I just started peppering the course teacher with all these questions. I breathe every single day. Why is a breathing practice going to help me? I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I dove into finding out the biology of how our brain and our body are connected, what the vagus nerve does in terms of sending messages between the brain and the body back and forth to one another, how the vagal tone gets tightened when we're in difficult life situations. Like if we watch an accident happen outside and we go, all of us, what does that do to our body? How does that tense things up? How does that change the neural circuitry? And so I was able to buy into that breathing would help me, because in my mind, it was like, well, shit, like, okay, there's a reason why these rhythmic patterns are going to start to normalize structurally the things that are in my body. And if I stick with that, then over time, not so dissimilar to, I had an ACL surgery, right? And I had to connect my brain and my body. Excuse me, I'm getting asked to put the mask back on. Hold on. I had to connect the muscles back again between my quadricep and my calf muscles, because they drilled a hole in there. If I need to reconnect that in my physical body, what's happening in my physical body that the life experiences that happened started to disconnect that brain-body connection. And so breathing became kind of, my focus, integrated breathing practices, specifically normalizing that vagal tone, so that now being able to send the messages back and forth between the brain and the body became normalized. And I became obsessed, and Barry, you know a little bit about this with the practitioner alliance that we have that you're on. I became obsessed with what is it that...
Go in the bathroom.
Go in the bathroom?
Go in the bathroom.
Okay.
If the cops are walking on here, they'll take you off in cuffs. Go in the bathroom.
Okay, let me put this mask on, guys, so that sorry for everyone who's on right now. I went to Cardigan.
We don't want the cops to take you off the train. I think I
you
heard.
You heard that comment, right? Yeah,
the cops will take you off.
We could have a whole nother show talking about the ridiculousness of this, but I won't get into that. I became obsessed with, well, if breathing is starting to help me feel better, when I go to the gym to work out of my body and to lose weight and to get in better shape, there's multiple options for me to choose from. For example, if I want to do cardio, there's an elliptical, there's a kickboxing, there's Stairmaster, there's rowing, there's cycling. Okay, this breathing thing might be working for me right now, but what if I get bored of it, number one? What if it stops working, what are the different modalities that are available to us that allow us to, reconnect and to normalize and to get back to that place of homeostasis? And so I went everywhere from Jakarta, Indonesia, to learn about Qigong meditation, to Arizona to learn from David Berceli what trauma. And from what came from that was, and I know we haven't talked about the story of even starting a nonprofit, which I can certainly do, but as kind of what I became obsessed with is, what are the modalities that are out there, and how do we, from a marketing perspective, bring those modalities to the forefront, so that instead of them be considered complementary, alternative, holistic terms that people shy away from and are scared of and think that that's voodoo and pixie dust stuff, how do we normalize it? These are the things that actually work and that help us feel better. And so that was where we came up with the concept of STAR, which is an acronym. So think of the word STAR with 2 R's. Stress and trauma, the thing that builds up inside of us. Active, meaning we need to do activities. Releasing and rewiring. So a gym concept where there's multiple modalities to be able to use, that we can start to actually take control and not wait for the pill to kick in, not wait for the therapist to, what we see in those drawings all the time, to untangle the yarn in our brain for us when we come in once a week. Again, going back to, I'm giving you guys props, using a modality like a rhythmic type of modalities, getting us back into a functional place. Our body needs movement, and I think when people hear movement, they think physical, and they think cardiovascular, and they think, okay, maybe there's a little bit of a side effect of an endorphin release that helps. But the reality is, the brain-body connection breaks down over time when we live through these challenging life events. I think instead of mental illness, which is what we hear about so often, I think most of what we're seeing in society is dysregulated central nervous systems. And if we can find ways to help people understand how those central nervous systems become dysregulated and to help them, give them these practices to start to normalize those structures in our body and reconnect in a way where the disconnect starts to happen, people get happier, they're less on edge, they have more energy and they're more vitality, they live longer, they're less likely to get cancer and diabetes. There's a whole positive structure of dealing with the stuff that we're carrying around in that invisible backpack that we have, a backpack that I didn't know I was carrying around. And I think, especially you deal with a lot of musicians, when you have something that you love, if it's music in their case, in my sports and being a sports executive, when you have something that you love, you stick with it. And sticking with it when other things go by the wayside in your life, like hanging out with your friends or watching your teams on TV or going to concerts, as long as you're able to do what you love doing all the time, you don't notice those other things going by the wayside because you're like, oh, I still wake up every day and I'm Dr. Barry who helps people. I'm Zach who helps people. I'm Eric who puts sports fans in arenas. Your mind gets fixated on what is working and it sticks with what is working and it forgets about the things that are starting to fall apart and it doesn't notice them as much until eventually we get knocked on our ass and we can't take it anymore. Or as you're dealing, so much of the topic of what you're discussing being substance abuse, we turn to things because when the dysregulation starts to happen and suffering, and to make it go away because we're not given other tools. And those some things are usually substances, they're drugs or alcohol, there's sex, there's gambling. And in my case, you were there for that Miami event that we had, Barry, someone came up and I got up there and I said, I'm a holic. And it was kind of like probably weird because people were like, what the hell is he talking about? And I said, I'm a workaholic. And I believe that very strongly, that my addiction is work. I bury myself in what I love doing, right? What was sports, now it's helping people. But maybe part of that is it allows me to focus on something that I love to do. And it doesn't allow me to sit in my own stuff and work on my own stuff. And eventually over time that catches up to you. And so finding that balance between how do you work on you, just because you love what you do every day, that doesn't mean you're doing the work that you need to do to start to feel better.
I mean, thank you for sharing all that. I'd like to just take a second to welcome our Facebook viewers. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, so we apologize for that. And we have Eric Kussin on here from Same Here Global, fascinating individual who has literally been through what I would consider hell and back. Just a tremendous story of redemption. He is traveling on a train right now to Washington, D.C. from New York to do an event with the Washington Wizards. So every once in a while he does go in and out with his service. But if you're really good at this, you can almost 100% make out exactly what he's saying. Eric, there's a couple things I'd like to get to with you. One of the things I would like to talk about is stigma. Stigma seems to be a huge talking point when it comes to mental health. Or I was actually speaking with someone yesterday that corrected me that the new term for mental health is mental fitness. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. It actually came from a friend of mine, hopefully a future guest, who used to be on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for many years. And so, when we look at stigma, how does perception or shame really stop somebody from seeking the help that they need?
You could have me on for 2 hours talking about this because I'm so passionate about this topic. And I think the way that we've addressed it as a society is so friggin' backwards, and continue to address it as a society is so friggin' backwards. I'll tell you that, and we'll get back to this. I don't want to focus on this one at the beginning, but I don't think replacing mental health with mental fitness is the right move. I'll explain why in a second. But when I went through what I went through, and I realized that it was life experiences that impact all of us, right? I started getting calls when I shared my story, and the calls weren't, Eric, I have depression, Eric, I have anxiety. Let me put this thing back on, so if they keep bothering me, you'll know why.
Yeah, we don't want you to
the
get
calls
arrested.
Weren't, Eric, I know, I've got the cuffs ready just in case. So it wasn't, Eric, I have depression, Eric, I have anxiety. It was, Eric, I lost a child to SID, sudden infant death syndrome, 5 years ago, and I've never been the same. Eric, I'm a married mother, 2 beautiful kids, white picket fence, love my husband, but I broke up with my college boyfriend of 4 years, and that was 10 years ago. And I've had a knot in my stomach ever since that hasn't gone away. What I realized was the common human experience is that we all go through these challenging life events: divorce, job loss, breakup, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, cyberbullying, sickness of loved ones, loss of loved ones at premature ages. And when those things happen to us, those are the things that start to build up in our system and start to make those impacts and start to dysregulate the central nervous system. And knowing that and understanding that, and knowing that we needed mental fitness routines, so I'll give credit to the person who says that, right? Is I heard that, and I went to the largest nonprofit websites in our country, and no arrest on the first show. I went to the largest nonprofit websites in our country, and I won't say the names, but I think everyone knows who they are. And I did what I did when I worked in sports. When we worked in sports for teams, we would do audits of all the other teams' websites. What are we doing well? What could we improve upon? How do they sell their tickets on which page? How do they break up group sales versus individual game sales, etc.? So I did the same thing with these nonprofit websites in mental health. And I saw 3 things in particular on the websites that were consistent. And you think, okay, that's awesome. In the space of mental health, we want our biggest platforms to be consistent. The challenge is the way they were consistent, at least how I believe so, back then in 2017, and the same messages all the way through now into 2022, I think move us further away from understanding this topic as opposed to coming together on it. And that stigma that you're talking about actually create more of it rather than less of it. And let me explain what I mean. First thing I noticed was every one of them start with a statistic. It's either 5 shadows with 4 of them grayed out and 1 of them in color, or the numbers written out and it says 1 in 5 people have mental illness. Okay. And I understand what the goal there is, to try and show 20% of people. That's a lot of people. You should check after your mental health in case you're in those 1 in 5. The problem with that statistic is it makes the topic binary. You're either in the group and you're on the line of the 1 in 5, or you're not in the group. And if you're not in the group, if you're in the 4 in 5, what are you? And I know the answer to this question is a rhetorical question because I ask it every time we have an event, which is probably 2 or 3 times a week in person. If you're not in the 1 in 5, what are you? And then the answers that I get are healthy, fine, normal, and okay. If you can find for me people who are healthy, fine, normal, and okay, and that's all they are, I'd love to meet those people because those people don't exist. That's called not actually living life and what happens to us.
Have you ever heard?
You guys hear me?
Yeah. Have you ever heard when somebody says they're fine, what that acronym stands for?
Yeah, false. Yeah. There's a bunch of different acronyms.
Fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
Yep. Good ones, and I love that one. I mean, that one's a little more impactful and hard hitting. So I'm all for ones that are impactful and hard hitting. But Barry, it's the reason why how are you doing as a question, which is the most common question we ask each other every single day, no matter what language it is. And the most common answer we get is, I'm all right, I'm okay, I'm fine, right? That's not an answer. That's a pleasantry. We don't get anywhere with that answer, right? Which we can get into in terms of tools and stuff that we create to try and get past that. But so that's the first thing that's on all these websites. And by the way, is the boilerplate that is used for every article that is written. You have an article on suicide of a public figure. You have an article on an overdose of a public figure. Immediately, they start every single article with, according to, and then give the name of the nonprofit organization or research organization. 1 in 5 people in this country are mentally ill. So already they're creating a binary topic. You're either in the group or you're out of the group. The second thing on all the websites were, and this is going to directly address your point, all the campaigns are an action word followed by stigma. So stop the stigma, stomp the stigma, break the stigma, right? Well, What does the term stigma mean? It means there's a group of people forming opinions and judgments about another group of people in an unfair way. This is human beings we're talking about. This isn't inanimate objects. So when you tell people out loud, if the three of us formed the Barry, Dan, Eric Organization for Mental Health, and our rallying cry was stop the stigma, stomp the stigma. That's a great rallying cry for the three of us. It's probably the worst rallying cry that there is for the people we'd like to stop stigmatizing, because stop stigma then becomes a command. You group of people over there, you human beings who are stigmatizing us affected, victimized people, you need to stop doing what you're doing. That doesn't bring people closer together. That tears people further apart. So the very campaigns that try to normalize are actually doing the opposite and pushing people away. And now you add a third layer onto that. These websites would all show the stories of celebrities. So it started with Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan before there was social media. And it was like, Britney Spears, she's part of the 1 in 5 group. She's got depression. Lindsay Lohan, she's part of the 1 in 5 group. She's got anxiety. Let me take this thing off. I'll have a little bit of time. So they would say, you're part of the 1 in 5 group. You're not alone. Look, these celebrities go through it too. But then the websites would link to an Us Weekly or People Magazine article. And it was like, Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. And then go into the world of social media right now. Kanye West has bipolar, says crazy things about his family. Antonio Brown runs off the football field, must be whacked and crazy and out of his mind for taking his shirt off, right? So add those three things up on the biggest billboards that we have in mental health. That's for 1 in 5 people only. 1 in 5 people, we need to stop stigmatizing that group of people, those over there. And if you want to know if you're in that group of 1 in 5, have you shaved your head? Do you dress like a hot mess? Have you run off the basketball court in a panic attack like Kevin Love? And have you tried to slit your wrist before? How many people are raising their hand going, yeah, I'm part of that mental health group, right? And so, Barry, to address the point of the gentleman or the woman, I don't know who it was, who said to you mental fitness, the reason I don't like the term mental fitness is because there's a difference between mental toughness and mental health. And so much in this space, the LeBron James of the world working with Calm, for example, that's considered mental toughness. I'm doing training to visualization practices to get myself to a better place so I can see myself hitting that game-winning shot on the court. What athletes do, what people do with visualization and getting themselves to a mentally tough place is very different than mental health. And I'll give a case in point example of that. If any of you saw Simone Biles and what happened at the Olympics, if any of you saw that young Russian skater and what happened to her at the Olympics, 2 different Olympics, similar situation, stress, trauma overload. What happened with Simone Biles? She's one of the rape victims of Larry Nassar. Her brother's on trial for triple murder. So she goes into those events, and unfortunately has the mishaps that she has, in the team competition the way that she does, and people are comparing that to Brett Favre being on the field and fighting through, an ankle injury where he's able to use his mind to focus and be able to get over those obstacles. Dealing with a stressor that's happening in an event, in a game, in a particular situation is way different than having had events that have built up traumatically in your system over time that start to disrupt and dysregulate that brain-body connection, where now you're Simone Biles and you're expected to do flips in the air better than anyone else. Well, she made uncharacteristic errors because her mental health was impacted so much that brain-body connection started going by the wayside. Same exact thing happened with this Olympic skater, with all that controversy around what she was dealing with the whole doping incident and whether or not she was involved in it or not, whether she actually took it or not, and how she was expected to be the savior for her country. So there's a difference between mental fitness, mental toughness, and mental health. Mental health is something that I think describes all of it. It lives on a continuum. It goes all the way from thriving neural circuitry all the way to what we call on our scale sinking, which is shutdown, possum, freeze mode, right? Like our systems and our circuitry, exactly how I was for that 2.5 year period, laying in that bed, unable to function. It goes all the way from thriving all the way to there. By the way, a place on that continuum is mental illness. It's just mental illness is not the entire continuum. Mental fitness is a place on that continuum. It's just not the entire continuum. So we need to start looking at mental health as something that lives across that full continuum, that we all are on that continuum, all fluctuate up and down on. There's different places that we get to on that continuum, but when we start to bucket things and we try to change language, that's where we start to get into trouble. And I think we need this broad understanding that everyone's mental health gets impacted, just like everyone's physical health gets impacted. We don't have an issue with the term physical health, do we? Even though some people have heart disease and diabetes, and some people are healthy and are able to run on the treadmill and seem like they're in top physical shape and can run a marathon, that physical health is a continuum, just like mental health is a continuum. And I think we need to keep driving home that point that on that continuum, but the continuum is what we're all on collectively.
I mean, that's really good stuff, which kind of leads me to my next point. If you can hear me over the train conductor,
Yep.
what are some of the unique pressures that athletes and celebrities face that lead to or sustain these mental health issues?
So it's fascinating because to me, public figures are a microcosm of society, right? And that's not to say that they don't live unique lives. It's just to say the way that dysregulation happens for them, the stressors might be a little bit different because they're living in the public eye. But at the end of the day, how they are impacted, I think, is similar, right? Now, you might look at an athlete and you might say, type A, high performer, high pressure, perfectionist. That's all stuff that they get beaten on in their system over and over again. So I'm gonna paint a picture right now verbally, and hopefully this helps describe things of what athletes go through, what everyday people go through, and the intersection between the two. If when we're born, like we'll use Barry as an example here, Zach, since you're not feeling well. So little Barry is born, and Barry, as a child, you're looking to the left. So we're looking at a cross section of your skull, inside your skull. And instead of seeing a brain inside your skull, we're seeing a balloon at the bottom of at the base of that skull. And that balloon starts to fill with air over time. And it starts to fill that balloon into that cavity where that skull is, where that brain would be. So your balloon is basically replacing where the brain would be as you're growing. And what type of air is filling that balloon is two different colors of air. Okay, so you've got blue air and you've got red air. And even though the opening of that balloon is tiny, I want you to think that the blue air is coming in the front left part of the balloon and going to the front, kind of where your forehead would be as a child, and the red air is going to the back right part of the balloon, kind of the where the back of your head would be, right? And why do I give blue in the front, red in the back? Overly simple, the positive events that happen in your life, red are the challenging events that happen in your life. What is the one coping mechanism we have as human beings? Push it to the back. Time heals all wounds. I don't want to deal with that situation right now. I'm going to forget about it. And over time, it's going to go away, right? So now, what are we doing? We're moving that red air to the back because we don't like to feel it. Well, when we have a balloon that's got a lot of space in it, we can afford to do that. But over time, the blue air, when you're a little kid, is things like going on the swing set for the first time or seeing the Ice Cream Man for the first time. And the red is things like stubbing your toe on the boardwalk or getting grounded by your parents. And as I'm describing that, I want you to think that the blue is filling up more and the red is filling up more, right? And if those things are happening, if those things are happening over time, well, now the blue becomes things like, I need the love of my life, I get the job that I want, the red is someone in my family, and I lost my job, right? It's really difficult life experiences. So over time, the red and the blue are getting eerily close to one another because the balloon has a finite amount of space to fill in. And as much as you've been pushing the red to the back, eventually that red and blue fill that balloon enough that the red starts to infringe on the blue. And what do we use oftentimes when we go to the general practitioner or the first level psychiatrist is we use a piece of green tissue paper, the medication. So you put a piece of green tissue paper in between the red and the blue air, hoping that the red's not going to continue to infringe on the blue. But eventually, we do nothing about that red air. That red air bursts through that piece of tissue paper, goes into the blue, and we get this purple mishmash. And that purple mishmash is where we start to get feelings of symptoms like brain fog and cognitive malaise and fatigue and lack of executive functioning, which leads to things like mental illnesses, right? And the reason I gave that example is because that red air, it happens from life events that happen to us, but it also happens based on our own thought patterns. And example being non-athlete, for example, you're in a plane and you experience turbulence for the first time, and you look around and no one else is freaking out, but you're freaking out thinking this plane could fall out of the sky at any moment, but no one else seems to be freaking out. You're now holding on to that thought. It's circulating in your brain. You don't feel like you can talk to anyone about it because it scares the shit out of you, but you don't see anyone else freaking out about it. Now, every time you walk by a plane at the airport or you see a plane in the air, you get that knot and that pit in your stomach being like, that plane, oh my God, that plane could fall out of the sky. You watch 9/11 if you live through it, or you watch a documentary if you're too young and you see a plane fly in a building, or you remember the Kobe Bryant incident with the helicopter unfortunately falling out of the sky. You think, well, any object that flies in the sky could fall out of the air. Guess what? That's all thought patterns that are building that red air in that balloon of yours. So for athletes, it's not that they have red air and others don't. For high performers, it's not that they have red air and others don't. It's that where the red air comes from, they have life events just like everybody else. But now you're in the public eye. You're dealing with the pressures of people calling you out on social media. They're human beings. If anyone wants to take a look at a pretty incredible soundbite, I did a post on LinkedIn. I'm not saying my LinkedIn post was incredible. I was saying this guy's comment was incredible. DJ Smith, who's the coach of the Ottawa Senators, he was being asked if some of the players on his team were affected in terms of the way that they played based on the trade deadline coming up. And most answers that we've heard in the history of professional sports on TV is the guys are professionals. This is part of their job. They know what they signed up for when they get these positions. They get paid millions of dollars to do these things. And DJ Smith goes, in 1 month, there's a chance that these guys are going to have to pick up their entire life, move to a completely different market, be the new guy in the room, have to reprove themselves, bring their wife and their kids with them, new school districts, places that they've never lived before. Of course, this impacts them. We all have health. We all have mental health. And when I heard that from a coach, I was like, that's the most refreshing thing I've heard, because it's finally people showing the human side of what impacts us. And so, look, I mean, you know, we could go on and on and on about how the life of a professional athlete or a public figure differs because they're in the public eye. At the end of the day, it's that buildup of that red, and I just think that their buildup is different. I think the situation, sadly, with Katie Meyer, the soccer suicide, you heard a lot of perfectionist attitude. She won the national championship the previous year, 2 years in 2019. She's coming into a situation where she's expected to perform and be the top of anyone, you know, in the country. But you know what? If someone isn't diagnosed with a mental illness, we think, oh, that person doesn't have issues. There's nothing wrong there. We're not susceptible to losing them. If there's anything I can impart on this conversation with you guys is, it doesn't matter what you're labeled or not labeled with. When that stuff builds up inside of you, when that red air in that balloon gets too big, we're all susceptible to the system breaking down. And when that system breaks down, the reason I'm open about the suicidal ideation I had, and I was fortunately able to fight through, is because I believe that error message can happen to anyone, whether you've been diagnosed or not, whether you've gone to the doctor before or not. And we need to train people on what those feelings feel like, what the thoughts are that are going through your head, and how you fight back from them. Because when they're strong, they take you over, and it's like you feel like you have no power against them.
It's really remarkable, the insights that you have. You know, I see why, and you know, not for nothing, everything that you've been through before has really put you on this path to where you are today. Because you know, the 15 years that you spent in front offices for professional sports teams, I don't think you could have ever envisioned your life today, and this you know, to use a better term, you know, literally from one train track to a completely different destination, and really figuring out ways to now interweave what your mission is today with what your mission used to be, and your love for sports, your love for athletes and celebrities, which, you know, brings me to the point, what now, right? Can you tell us a little bit about this Same Here Global initiative, basically what it's all about, some of the names of the people that are involved, the impact. I noticed sometime throughout this NFL season, your Same Here Global was written on the cleats of some of the athletes that were actually playing in the NFL when they had their favorite organization or foundation that they wanted to represent. And so can you just tell us a little bit about, the Same Here Global?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came to in 2017 and started feeling better, what I realized at that time was Prince Harry was probably the biggest celebrity who was talking about mental health at the time, and I thought shared in a very vulnerable, honest, and open way, shared the challenge of losing a mother, talk about being a public figure, that happening in a very public setting, and then shared the type of therapy that he was doing to work through the process of that trauma that he experienced, of the loss of not only a mom to so many, right, a daughter to so many on a public stage. But when I looked at the statistics for the UK after that, I saw a 30-year high in suicides 2 years following his story. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that Prince Harry caused that spike. What I mean by that is, even when you have the largest celebrity in the world, at least in those Commonwealth countries, the largest celebrity in the world with the largest social media following, when they open up and they share, that doesn't necessarily buck the trends. That doesn't make people pay attention to this. That doesn't change behavior. So my thought process was, we have to flip the narrative away from 1 in 5 to 1 of 5 and 5. Every single person faces challenges. Every person has mental health. Mental health lives across the continuum. And to do that, okay, maybe the reason I worked in sports for those 15 years, as much as I loved actually working in sports, is because it gave me this opportunity to be able to reach back to those contexts that I had and said, join me on this ride. We need to show a tapestry of different people, of different backgrounds, different looks, different personalities, different geographies, different socioeconomic backgrounds, all sharing what's our sign language sign is same here. Zach, Barry, you and I were the same. And how do I know that we're the same? Because you're older than 15 years old. You've been through some pretty challenging life events. That's part of what the life experience is. And if we get athletes and entertainers to lead with the challenges that they face as being representative of what their mental health is, as opposed to the illnesses that they have and the labels and the disorders they end up with. Look, I don't need to throw any athlete or celebrities talking about it under the bus, but how many times do we need to see an ad that says XYZ personality has depression, use Talkspace. XYZ personality has anxiety, use Headspace, use BetterHelp. It's a billboard. It's a billboard about labels, and then labels leading to using products. And so our mission is to normalize society's perception of mental health and make it part of our everyday conversation. Everyday conversation is the stuff we go through. So we started with an alliance of celebrities. Yes, you're right in that they wear the logos on their shoes. Robin Leonard, the Golden for the Golden Knights, wears the hashtag on his helmet and on his pads. We have celebrities going out like Aaron Taylor from college football in the NFL, goes out on Super Bowl Radio Row and talks about the normalization of it. We're using the platform of these people, not to say that celebrities and athletes go through it, but to say even someone like me who's been successful in the public eye, I have a story just like the rest of you. It's 5 and 5. It's all of us who have a story. We couple that with what you're a part of, Barry, which is, Dr. Andrew Cleaner, an alliance of integrative psychologists, psychiatrists, neuropsych practitioners that we call Same Here Psych. And the idea here is you've got all these smart people who use various modalities, Qigong meditation, yin yoga, TRE, brain body, havening, ART, ACT therapy, music therapy, to help people articulate that nervous system to actually get to the source of what as opposed to
Well, we were doing really good there for a really long time.
We were doing real well.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going through a tunnel on the train.
Yeah. Eric, are you back with us?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We were doing really good there for, I was mentioning we had a good stretch the reception gods were smiling on you for the majority of this train ride, and they just shit all over you. So we're gonna put it
Well,
like that.
I don't know where I ended. I don't know where I ended up, but I think I was at the point of the practitioners.
Yeah, you were talking about the
and
practitioners and the different modalities, and that's essentially, I think I heard you say axe therapy, which I don't think was a thing.
yeah, AXO, acceptance and commitment therapy, invented by a gentleman named Stephen Hayes, right? So
Okay.
the goal of what we do with the Same Here Psych Alliance and the STAR Alliances, Stress and Trauma Active Release and Rewiring, is let's couple the celebrity of these people with platforms along with the modalities that actually work. Let's create an ecosystem to teach people how the brain and body is connected and get the message out there about the common life experiences and challenges that we're all impacted by, with explaining a little bit enough of the science for people to understand this isn't this foofy thing called mental health that I don't know much about. Instead, there's actually a biological connection in the body that starts to get dysregulated. What are the types of practices I can start to do, the modalities that I can do at home that these doctors can teach me that I can do on a daily basis so I can get control back and start working on myself? And so, we take that type of programming into everywhere from K through 12s, we call them Same Here schools. Colleges, we call it Same Here sit downs. Offices, we call it Same Here safe. Sports teams and leagues, which is what I'm going down to do with the Wizards right now, Same Here sports. And then servicemen and women and first responders, we call Same Here service. So think of it as a people-led organization, all of whom are holding hands, rowing in the same direction, talking about mental health as 5 and 5 instead of 1 and 5, leading with our life experiences instead of disorders, and giving people tools to be able to work on themselves, to be able to get themselves out of a bad place, or even thrive if they're in a good place and they want to start feeling even better, as opposed to let's wait for disorder to develop and then first start working on ourselves, or let's wait until we turn to substances and wait to start working on ourselves. We can be proactive. We can better understand this. We can start to avoid tragedies like the Katie Meyer tragedy, like the recent one you might have heard about the assistant principal that lost to suicide over on the West Coast within the last day. So there's so much work to be done. There's so much education to be done, but I'd rather do it with me being decentralized. I don't mind sometimes talking and being the face of it, but the goal is everyone's equal in this, in our organization, and everyone has a chance to go out and talk and share. And we could pull together advocates with celebrities with tools that can go anywhere to anyone. The main message is same here. You and I were the same. When that's the message that we lead with, it doesn't matter who's leading the charge. What matters is that the room becomes normalized because we all feel like we're in it together.
I mean, this has really been, and Zach, I think you would agree, this has really been a thought-provoking conversation. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're 100% right. It really resonated, and very similar to a lot of experiences I've had.
Yeah, I mean, so, just for the viewers, if you are looking for help, one thing I always like to bring up is that people who struggle with mental health, it's not, and this goes back again to the stigma, right? We are not bad people that need to become good. We are sick people that need to get better. And, there's no stigma for somebody who has cancer or diabetes or heart disease, right? We actually go and seek the help and want to seek the help. And unfortunately, when it comes to mental health or addiction, this stigma somehow makes us believe that it's not okay to ask for help, and we need to keep the secret to ourselves. So for all the viewers, samehereglobal.org. Is a place that you can visit. It's a safe place. That is, Eric's little thing that he has going on. I'm sure he is available through the contact tab, through that website. Eric, I really want to thank you for taking the time to, come out today, working us into your schedule, even if it was on a train. And as Jason had mentioned in the comments, the train gods did smile on us for 98.5% of the past hour, which is more than I could have hoped for. We knew going into this was going to be, kind of spotty and touch and go. Thank you to the viewers that put up with the and, but it's, I've become fairly well at reading lips too, except when you freeze. So, Eric, do you have any just closing things you want to share? We're here at the end of the hour, and anything you might want to put out to the audience.
Yeah. How the conversation flows, I always think of, like, I don't have like one standard boilerplate template that I share, but you just shared, Barry, well, we're sick people who need help, and with cancer, why isn't it that way? Well, I think we've accepted as a society that everyone is susceptible to cancer because we've seen how many people who have it, and we've learned that it can develop in any of us. In fact, most of us have cancerous cells in our body. There's not enough for it to be considered this cancer, right? We've got cells that have unfortunately morphed in that way. And in the same way, if we don't think about mental illness as have it or not, we think about it as something that we're all susceptible to, that builds up inside of us. Well, then the people who, quote, have it don't have to feel that way, because the people who don't, quote, have it know that they're just as susceptible, and it's based on the life experiences and how it builds up over time. Then we're all one team working on this, as opposed to the people who are affected and the people who are not affected. So make sure you're checking on yourself, make sure you're working on yourself, make sure you're talking to other people, make sure that you're normalizing conversation through sharing vulnerably. That's the only way this gets better. There's not a single campaign that changes the conversation. It's open.
Train gods. The train gods.
Did I cut out?
Just at the very end. Zach,
Probably the most important part,
Any closing comments, Zach? Don't tell me you froze too. You're not on a train. Zach froze. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to our guest, Eric Kussin, supporting us in our premiere of Reiman Reason. I hope all the listeners have enjoyed. Please tune in next week, next Wednesday at noon, before a new guest will be revealed.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.